Well, Brazil's president has promised to put aside $25 billion for public transport as more protests are planned. In a meeting with regional leaders and protesters, Dilma Rousseff also proposed a referendum on political reform. Politicians have been trying to stop unrest, which broke out over a week ago over transport fare hikes. People are also protesting about the cost of staging the Football World Cup and the Olympics in the coming years. We've got reporters covering this in two cities in Brazil. In a moment, we'll go to Adam Raney, who is in Rio De Janeiro. But first, let's speak to Gabriel Elizondo, who's been covering that meeting in the capital, Brasilia. Gabe, so more promises from the president, but is it enough to calm things down?
Well, we'll have to wait and see about that, because that's really up to the protesters on how they decide to respond. But I can tell you, here at the presidential palace, this was a little bit unexpected. This is sort of a sign that Dilma Rousseff has acknowledged that she needed to do something big and bold to try to contain the growing social unrest in this country that really had the highest levels of government here quite nervous, especially after the protests here in Brasilia late last week. I can tell you this national referendum for political reforms is meant to make corruption, political corruption, a more serious crime here in Brazil. And that's really the key to what she announced today. But it was also this national pact as well, like you mentioned, $25 billion to urban mobility, public transportation, health reform. She says that she wants to accelerate health funding for hospitals and doctors, education. She reaffirmed what she said last Friday, that 100% of oil royalties will go to education. That's something that's going through Congress right now. And she also talked about economic reforms as well. So a lot of announcements by Dilma Rousseff late today here in Brasilia. We'll have to see now how all this shakes out, and if this really will be enough to really calm the tensions that have been sweeping over Brazil now for well over a week.
Okay, meanwhile, FIFA's Secretary General has been visiting Brazil, FIFA giving a press conference earlier in the day. How worried is FIFA about possible trouble on the streets of Brazil when the World Cup takes place next year?
Well, that's right, the World Cup next year, but right now we're in the middle of the Confederations Cup, a FIFA event, which is sort of the warm-up for the World Cup. Lots of journalists here, lots of attention on Brazil. And I'm told that behind the scenes, FIFA is worried, but they're not saying that publicly. What they said today in a press conference in Rio was that FIFA said, we have no plan B. We do not plan to take the World Cup away from Brazil. We have no intention of doing that. They say they have full confidence in the Brazilian security officials to contain any sort of social unrest, but certainly that most of these protests, or a lot of the strongest ones in Rio, in the city of Belo Horizonte, for example, Salvador, these are where Confederation Cup matches are being played, and these are also where World Cup matches are being played. And I'll just wrap by saying that the urgency that you see by the federal government right now, it's urgency that would be happening irregardless if the World Cup was going to be happening in Brazil next year. But I think you're also seeing it pushed even a little bit harder, because they know, the government, they have to get this under control. They have to meet some of the demands of the protesters because of these big events that are going to be happening in Brazil in the coming year.
All right, Gabe, a lot at stake. Thanks very much. Let's speak now to Adam Raney, who is in Rio De Janeiro for us. Adam, what's going on there? Are the protests picking up again?
They're not picking up necessarily in volume or intensity, but there is a protest going on a little more than a kilometer from where I'm standing. We were just at the site. It's just the other way from where I'm standing right now. There are several hundred people there. But as you can see, I'm on a street. It's rush hour. There's traffic here in Rio. This street is not being blocked by protesters. And on Thursday night, when some 300,000 people crowded this area and later had confrontations with police just a few hundred meters that way, this was a totally different scene. We're seeing protests still percolating across the country and popping up in spontaneous ways and on Facebook and other social media, but we're not seeing those numbers so far. But as Gabriel was reporting from Brasilia, we're still in the middle of this Confederations Cup tournament, and there's still a lot of attention from FIFA, from the international community. And this tournament is not over, and we're hearing calls for a general strike. We're hearing calls for more protests at the finals on the weekend here in Rio. So we're still keeping a close eye to see how this movement, which although clearly there's people orchestrating a lot of the protests through social media, but it's probably out of their hands. So there's a mass movement of people that still might come out spontaneously, and we need to see if what Dilma Rousseff, the president of Brazil, is doing is going to calm that down enough. So far, it's still early days here, and this could just bubble up again like it did earlier last week.
Okay, Adam, thanks. Adam Raney there in Rio de Janeiro for us, and Gabriel Elizondo in the capital, Brasilia. Thanks to you both.